Okay, I think we should be good to go now, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, I will call the meeting to order at 6:34 p.m. And we will do roll call. Jean here. Gerardo here. Kathy here. Larry here. Nathan here. Rebecca.
I'm here virtually.
Okay, and Deborah is absent and waiting on Steve potentially. So that is quorum. So we're good. I don't think Carl, do we have to vote to see Rebecca?
Yeah, we should do that because
okay,
following under that provision of the Open Meetings Act, not the one.
Okay, cool. So all in favor of seating Rebecca virtually or to attend the meeting? Aye. Aye. All opposed? Any abstain? Okay. Rebecca, now you're really sitting with us. Cool.
Thank you.
Was there any public comment?
There was none.
Okay. So to kick off this first committee of the whole meeting, we will start with the policy committee. So Jean, do you want me to help with some of this part? Or
did you guys discuss this last meeting?
We didn't have a last meeting. We didn't have quorum, so.
All right. So we were supposed to be going over the internet access policy. Did everybody get a chance to read it or not? Okay. Anybody have any questions, suggestions, concerns?
Do we often have to restrict times for people on the computers?
We do that, but we don't have to.
Okay.
And the reason we do?
I would assume it was because there were too many people and not enough computers, but right now we're not suffering from that, nor have we been in the past 4 years that I've been here. So I think it's a roadblock and a hurdle and probably unnecessary to have a time limit.
Do you think we should remove that section? Section 2.3, time limits. We'll draft that.
I think we should still reserve the right. If it
Okay.
does get busy, we need the provision in there just in case.
Okay.
So just to may I ask a question now? So on time limits, an individual could conceivably sit there at the computer for hours and hours.
Yes.
Yeah.
They do. Instead of right now, they're asking for extensions every 2 hours. They come up to the desk and say, "Can I have more time?" So yes, we do it. We're now handling people 4 or 5 times a day instead of once.
So there's currently a two-hour limit on it.
Correct. And it's all set by software.
So then proposed policy is to change that so there's no 2-hour limit.
No, the policy just reserves the right to limit the amount of time people can spend on the computer. So if we're not talking about repealing the time limit, we're just saying that there is one if we want to enforce it.
So then the 2 hours would remain intact or not, or they have to go back and ask for more time?
Correct.
Oh, okay. So that's not, there's no change in that. So it's
That's correct. It would remain procedure of how we handle it, depending on whether there's a need to restrict time or not.
And it could always be extended or more limited as well.
Correct.
Yeah. Okay.
So John, I see you're looking at is that the old one? Is that the?
I believe this is the one I shared with you. This was the one with the markup. So if you wanted to see like what it looked like before, what this one is coming
Okay,
from,
cool. Okay.
everything that's stricken, red stricken out is
Okay.
added.
Just double checking.
Stricken is stuff that was removed. But yeah.
Nathan?
I was just gonna, I just want to make sure that everyone sees on section 4 that there's some work to be done so that we don't pass something that says blah, 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 blah.
Yeah, yeah.
Can we go back to 2?
Yeah.
Am I reading this incorrectly? Second sentence where it says validity or currency?
Yeah.
Should that be accuracy?
That was a word that I found in some other internet access policies, and it just means the recency, like current.
Current. Okay.
So it's like currency in the fact of how current it is. Or, yeah. Doesn't have to use that language. I don't know. I just found it and thought it was fun.
The question is this format the same as what we've been changing everything else to?
Mm-hmm. Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
So I think that it's also worthy in consideration of the policy itself, that the policy, the title is Internet and Technology Access / Electronic Resources. And I really think we need to refine that. Instead of saying it's an internet policy, we just say technology access policy, because the internet is an ungovernable thing. And so it's prudent to say that they're using our equipment. We control the equipment, and therefore they have to follow the laws and the rules of the land. But I don't think the internet is something that can be governed. And so I would recommend that we remove the word internet from the policy and just suggest technology access policy, because the internet is delivered via technology, which is funded by taxpayers and controlled by the library. I would strike electronic resources because those are part of the technology.
So we'll just read technology access.
Correct.
John, I know you've mentioned before that you've talked about our internet at the library is not filtered. Some libraries do filter their internet. I know here it says, you're not allowed to view sites that are inappropriate in a public setting. I just didn't know, like, is that in any way related to the filtered? If we have unfiltered internet, can we just say what they can and cannot go on, and whose discretion is that?
So it's tricky because the internet filtering is 50% accurate at best. And thus also it blocks out good information that people are trying to research and do research about. It does leave it relatively subjective as to what's inappropriate. That's relatively based on the staff member who's viewing it. Somebody may say that this person's looking at pornography and it's really just people in, scantily clad people. So there is a bit of interpretation in the policy. I do like that the policy states that they can't violate the laws or there are no decency. There are some certain decency laws, but we do not filter for the express purpose of not restricting access to information. So it's kind of complicated, but also it all depends on what the board wishes. Does that answer your question, Rebecca?
Yeah, it does. It does seem complicated though.
And somewhat subjective, which is kind of tricky.
Yeah.
Anybody else have any other concerns? Other than number 4, like you said, we really need to put some titles on that.
Section 4.01, do you want to state that you will provide a hotspot or that you may? And if it's provided, you're not by policy saying that you will have that.
Right. I think we should may it rather than will it.
Okay.
Section 2.02, do we know the policy number for library use?
Yeah, that's on the calendar, or policy reviews
Okay,
schedule, which is 2 pages after.
yeah.
If that's what we.
210, policy number 210.
Okay.
Number 4 again. Putting some titles on this.
For section 4.02, the title could be support.
Maybe one could be access. We provide access.
Section 1 would be access. Is that what you said?
That's a thought.
Section 4.1.
I'm not trying to write it, but yes,
I mean,
may make sense that way.
sure.
Unless we already have a section titled access.
Got its own section number, so.
So might we merge access wireless hotspots with the access to information, subsection 2.01?
Well, the idea I had when I was just looking at it when everyone was talking was originally just purpose,
Okay.
or I don't know.
I like purpose better.
Good. So the 4.01 hyphen purpose. And then 4.02 support.
Do we have any policy already about damaging library materials, or what the fines, or I'm sure we could just find some language from a different one to just plop into section 4.3.
Down the street, for you, would we need a separate one for loss or damage for these specific hotspots, or would that be a general, like, library policy, like, you break something, you spill something, you get, like, you have to pay the replacement fee? Does it need a kind of distinguished?
Yeah.
Oh,
Okay, I guess I'm confused. I'm with,
Oh, okay. I believe that it does, but it doesn't need, I think it's covered by, like, if somebody were to lose a book or something, we don't charge fines, so we do not fine people for overdue items, but we do charge a fee if someone were to damage or irreparably not return something, they would be charged a fee.
Sure, sure. So I guess I was just wondering if we need to even bother with the language for 4.03, or just assume that that would fall under, like, general library policy about replacing loss.
Because there is a piece of the policy that suggests that we're indemnifying ourselves as far as whatever people, if somebody were to come to the library and get a virus, we are not responsible. But similarly, if someone loses or is damaging something, it is covered by our policy already.
Yeah. Okay. The last sentence of 2.05 says individuals will be held liable for any damage that may cause. Now that is probably to your system in general, but it's also, I think, applicable to the hotspot. If you don't want to add another section on loss there.
We don't have double indemnity. Is that such a thing? Is that a movie? Yeah.
There is such a term. I don't know what I mean.
Sure, those small movies are extremely active.
So strike 4.03 altogether is what I'm gathering.
I'm not real computer good, so. When I come here, excuse me, and I have my own personal computer, and I come to the building, is that considered using the hotspot?
It is using the internet access points.
But that's not a hotspot though?
No. No, ma'am.
Okay. Nobody have anything else with Karen? This up? I've got 20 minutes.
So then this is a work in progress in other words. So like for section 4.06, 03, blah, blah, blah. I mean, there's, obviously it's not going to change, but so there's more to be worked on, my understanding is.
Yes, I will make.
Where do we
the-
go from here now?
I will make the recommended changes the board has made. I will change the document, and then in the board packet, 2 weeks hence, you will see the finished product, and we can still make revisions to it
Yeah.
at that point if there's wording or language that you want to change. But this gives me the opportunity to make all the significant and appropriate changes.
Is there something that covers loss or damage just for using other computers? That would make loss or damage cover everything?
I think the indemnity does cover us for loss or damage of any, like, the library is not responsible for people accessing and damage. They will be held liable for any actions. So if somebody hacks into our system and gives us a virus on purpose, they could be held liable. But as far as loss or damage, we aren't responsible because we are indemnified from section 2.05. Changes direct or indirect as a result of using library electronic resources, which is our Wi-Fi hotspots or our Wi-Fi access points or network.
So we could get rid of 4.3.
Correct.
Yes, no?
Yeah.
Everybody's saying yes?
Yeah.
Okay.
The thing I was thinking is, since there is some sort of fee associated with it, if there is a lost one, maybe even just under support, say see policy number, whatever. I don't know. We haven't worked on fines and fees in a bit, so we don't have to have everything referential to each other, but I just didn't know if somebody was looking at this, then they would know, okay, if I do lose it, then I'm gonna have to do this. Right?
So the electronic or digital access policy that we're looking at, technology access, we provide access to the network, we provide access to Wi-Fi hotspots, and but the equipment itself is just akin to a book or something. So if it is already covered by another policy in terms of fees. If someone fails to return or damages the item, we're already covered by another policy. Are we going to add a reference to that? That seems particular to the Wi-Fi hotspots, but maybe that's not the spirit of this policy.
Or maybe in future times, we just have a section at either the top where it just says references, and then we say other policy numbers or whatever at the bottom. I don't know if it's like that. But
The negative I see to that is when you amend the policies in the future that are referenced, it may not be caught. You know, so if you are too specific in your policies referring to other policies, sometimes that doesn't work real well for subsequent amendments. I like to have those references, legal references down at the bottom, but also they change and we don't notice it down the road. So it's a good practice. You just got to be very careful when you review stuff in the future to make sure you check the different ties.
okay.
And as far as the number at the very top, I would recommend changing it to 240. We just renamed the policy. So 240 was our internet access policy. We'll just call this technology access, and policy number 240 supersedes internet access policy.
Okay.
So do we need to vote on any of these changes we made?
What we would be, is just like governance committee, we vote to bring it to the board for approval. So yeah.
So
I make a motion that we bring this policy as amended to the board.
I'll second.
it's been moved that we bring to the board the policy as we have amended tonight and seconded. Are you ready? All in favor, vote by the usual sign. Oh, I'm sorry, I got my meetings crossed. Okay. I'm so sorry. Okay, all those in favor. Can I get a, do I have to do a roll call vote?
Say an aye.
Can we get an aye?
Aye.
Opposes? Seeing none, motion is carried.
Is Rebecca still there?
She is.
Okay,
Rebecca, you say aye?
She
Okay.
waved, yeah.
okay.
He said aye.
Next thing is the policies to review,
Yeah. So
the schedule.
another thing I was working on is kind of codifying and making a schedule for us so that we don't have a lapse in going through these policies again. If we have a schedule that we know every April, we're going to do library cards in meeting rooms. And so when it's the April meeting, we know we're going to talk about the library cards in the meeting room policy. So I just took what we already had, just put them in sections with the same numbers basically. And then on the next page made a year A and year B so that everything would be reviewed every 2 years, which is the recommend. I know 3 is more recommended, or 2, or whichever.
We're currently on a 2-year review schedule.
So this would put it at that. There are some that we do every year. So tried to put those in there as well. The personnel one, I don't know how much that's going to stay with the union contract, but I assume there will still be some sort of personnel policy that'll still exist that can be, I don't know if it'll take 4 months like I had here, but that could always be changed. And
You'll still have all of those policies because not all of your employees are in the bargaining unit.
okay,
And so what's not covered by the collective bargaining agreement, it's covered by your policy, the policy controls. If a topic is covered by both the contract and policy, you read them together, they both apply, unless there's a conflict where the contract is contrary to the policy, the contract controls.
Okay.
So yes, you'll still have to review them. Sorry.
okay, good. No, that still makes sense. And I tried to build in the executive director evaluation into that so that every year they will be evaluated. Might have to, I hope I did that right. Believe, yes, maybe something might have to be moved, but there will be also the mid-year executive director evaluation. So mid-year goal check-in. That's not something we do now, but
I had a question on that.
yeah.
I like the whole, because we didn't have a plan, but if the executive director is picked in October, you're going to evaluate him in January already? And he's only been in there 3 months?
I think to make sure the board is on track and continuing to do what we need to do, even if it's not the most thorough, we haven't evaluated somebody in.
Oh no, the reason I'm asking, when you do that, isn't the contract, excuse me, if you have a 1-year contract, wouldn't you be doing your evaluation at the end of the 1 year? Instead of in 3 months after you've been hired?
I think you're looking at an annual calendar, and once your executive director is in, it probably makes some sense to have a check-in at 3, 6, 9 months anyway, but the formal evaluation would be towards the end of the first year. I think Robert would just look at this as an annual checklist, and you might have to move that around if the date that the executive director is brought on.
Yeah, that makes sense. Thank you for pointing that out, because it wouldn't make sense to give them a full evaluation based on 3 months, but we also haven't done it, so we need to get on that and like practice it and see what we need to change. Or I also have it in there as just like we review the action of it. So we look at what our evaluation plan is. Do we need to change anything? Is anything not working? Is anything excessive? Not thorough enough? Yeah.
Hey, Rob.
Yeah.
For January, I noticed in January and February year B, there are two like executive director evaluation and then continued. What were you thinking, or like, can you explain like why like the 2 months for those?
Yeah, I just had it as kind of spillover in case like it takes a while. If the evaluation process takes, like, let's say we don't finish in January of that year, then we gotta, just so that there's nothing else that like would get in the way and we don't have to redo the calendar and like push things back.
Okay.
And also, depending on when the holidays fall, you know, it might be helpful to have a built-in buffer month, because this board has history of not meeting at the December meeting. So if that happens, you know, the meeting would fall like 2 days before Christmas or whatnot, it might be prudent to say, we got a little buffer, a little bit of wiggle room.
Yeah, and I also purposely did not put any policy to review in November, December.
Yeah, that's smart.
Because sometimes those meetings don't happen. So also we don't have as many policies. So we want to make more. We have some months to fill them in with.
More policy.
So is everybody in agreement with this policy review schedule?
Yeah.
Thanks, Rob.
Yeah, this looks good. This makes a lot of sense. Yeah.
So I need a motion to use this, or?
Oh, real quick statement. I know that technically, this doesn't start this year. That's why I have like the year A and the year B to start next year. So hopefully by the end of this year, we have gotten through all of our policy that are out, not looked at yet. So that's also kind of a deadline that we got to get through them this year. So anyways, that was the last thing I wanted to say.
There's November, December.
So you're looking for a motion to accept the schedule for the policy review?
Yes, I am.
I'll make the motion.
And I'll second it.
Been moved and seconded to accept the policy review schedule. All those in favor vote.
Aye.
Hi.
All those opposes. Opposes?
Unanimous.
Hearing none, motion's carried.
Thanks. Up next is, no one went over that. Okay, the Finance and Facilities Committee of the Whole. Larry.
Yeah, so I do at our finance meetings, typically I am, well, that's not good, I always just, first of all, go through the monthly board check detail. See if there's anything that, you know, I'm curious about and just don't know more information about. And then anyone else has, is free to ask a question, then we bring it to the board after we approve it, if we approve it, to have the board review and approve. So that's the format I'm thinking of using, because I haven't really had a chance to ask any questions about any of this until right now. So having said that, yeah, I'm just looking through the monthly board check detail for April 2022. And I had a few questions. And our business manager is here, Anna Goodman, and also who is serving now as our assistant, our acting assistant executive director. So yeah, so very good. So on page 2, moving down more toward the mid page on item 115605, there's a entity called automatic mechanical for building repairs, various building repairs in the amount of $2,418.94. And I'm just curious, what would that be for?
First, the 398 looks like 2 hours of labor.
Mhm.
And this is, they came in and checked the heater in the garage and to pick up a new motor. And the 889 is to replace the bearing and gasket on pump number 7. I believe we have 9 pumps. And by the way, I do have the stack of checks. See if anyone want to go through them.
Oh, thank you for that. Right under that entry, item number 115606, dated 4/15/2022, a 4LM Print Incorporated, for the amount of $2,705.39. Engagement and outreach. There's 2 entries there. I'm just curious what that is for.
Yeah, that is for our summer outreach. We do this every year. This get prepared for the summer.
Mhm.
We'll be giving like small items. In this case, we order like 1,000 pencils, beach balls, sunglasses, wristbands to patrons.
Mhm.
And the 950 are 500 tote bags.
Oh.
And it's very pretty. We order all different colors this year.
Mm.
Is that for the summer reading program?
Outreach in general. Yeah. In the summer.
So where do they go? When you say outreach, where are they giving out at?
Jennifer, I'm not sure where she went, but she was at the Easter, what do you call it? Easter
Extravaganza.
At the Park District. So they handing out stuff, and sometimes she go to schools.
She also went to the 1st, 2nd, and 5th ward meeting that happened at the Boys and Girls Club and handed out some of that swag, as they call it, that tchotchkes, sunglasses, magnets, that kind of stuff.
I know my kids look forward to doing that for like summer reading program and stuff when they get there. Yeah, they'll earn their bag.
And they'll fight over it too.
Oh, yeah. I told them we all got to do it.
right.
Get one.
So these items have our logo on it, Walking the Public Library.
Yes, that's why for imprint, they print the logo on the items.
Oh, very good. All right, well, moving right beneath that entry, the next item, entry number 115607, dated 4/15/2022. American Backflow and FIR, an amount of $2,190.50 for building services contract. What would that be for?
They replace the flow switch and sprinkler head. These, I'm not familiar with some of these jargon, so. But these building repair.
Your
Fire suppression.
suppression system, the sprinkler system has to be annually checked by a licensed plumber to certify that it's not backflowing, water can't flow backwards into the system. So that's probably part of it, and if they find an issue, then they have to replace.
Right. And everything costs a lot more this year. Yeah, they also repair trim ring, replace fire extinguisher. Charge.
Oh, okay.
Inflation.
Thank you. All right, moving on to page 3, item number 115610 near the top of the page, 4/15/2022. Gardens Landscaping Building Services Contract in the amount of $1,760. I presume that's for some sort of outside flowers or shrubs or something.
Actually, this one was for the whole winter snow plowing.
Snow plowing.
Right, we do a lot of them ourselves, but sometimes they do when it's a lot of snow, they do come out and help us. Because they have the
3-inch
plow.
threshold. If it's 2 inches or more, then they come.
Okay. Just moving along. See what I was working on. Okay, on the page bottom of page 4, item number 115626, dated 4/15/2022, to a Chicago filter company for building repairs in the amount of $780. Wow, what would that have been for?
They came and cleaned and changed the filters. Which particular filter?
Filters on the furnaces or something?
Yes, HVAC,
The air
air
ducts or
handling
something?
units, yeah,
Mhm.
in the boiler room.
Can I back up a couple?
Sure.
On 115621, the Juneteenth Commission, what was that?
So the county, or the city at least, or the group of interested parties that participated, it's not just Ms. England's program now, it's a lot of other groups,
Right.
so they've all come together, and that is our fee to participate in the Juneteenth Commission, if I'm not mistaken, Anna.
We have an ad, we have, oh no, that's from the grant, one of Gail's grants. We have a quarter-page ad in the large group.
Okay, so it's not money that's coming from, it's grant money.
It's grant money.
Okay.
It's a program with these African American.
All right, moving on to page 7. This would be item number 115642, more towards the middle of the page. Well, dated 4/15 of 2022 to an entity called the Midwest Tape, and the amount of $2,202.48, which is says for description general, some sort of e-book or something books or.
This is just general. It's e-book with the e-books. But this is general, but the last one, the one that the 1,695, that's for Hoopla.
Is for what?
But one of our electronic resources for books, and you can also stream audio books and movies. That's for the March usage.
Midwest Tape is also the vendor that we purchase audiobooks from, physical CD audiobooks. So a lot of those are probably audio. This is the end of the fiscal year, so you'll see a lot more the wrapping, this sopping up the remainder of the budget from the collection management department. They put a freeze on the whole month of April, Anna?
I'm not exactly freeze, but they do what you call catch up. Like, you know, they place the order and it didn't come, then they do the cleanup there and clean up in the collection.
All right, well, moving on to page 10. This is near the top of the page 115665, 4/29/2022, again to Midwest Tape. This one is in the amount of total amount of $1,470.86. That is again for, we just discussed this entity, this firm, whatever. What is that? For more audio books or what would that?
It's part of the collection. Yeah.
And then my final circle I have here is at the bottom of the same page, page 10 near the bottom, second to the bottom. Item number 115670, date of 4/29/2022 to a Swank movie licensing to in the amount of $1,155. What would that be for?
That's 1-year permits for us to show movies.
Show movies, what does that mean?
Show for us to show movies.
It's a license, so we have to have permission to show movies in the public, and we pay a licensing fee. It's an umbrella fee. It covers a whole slew of movies, so we can show, they have to be within their movie licensing bubble, but we can show a movie to the public with this licensing fee.
Oh, really? I never knew such a.
I got
that's considered a performance.
It's performance, yeah.
Over the summer, right? You do like a Sunday afternoon kind of, at least in the past.
Throughout the year, I mean.
I'm familiar with the
Yeah.
activity, I just didn't know it was a
Most
license.
of the children. It's kind of like with music too.
The music, I
have a question. Go back to the Midwest Tape. Is there a reason why they were separated into two different?
I do check one twice a month.
I'm sorry, say that again.
I issue checks twice a month. So it's different checks. one in the middle of the month, one at the end of the month, so it's different date.
Just because of the date is twice, okay,
Right.
all right.
One more question. 115664 innovative interfaces for 21,778. That is also 1 year for resource sharing. Oh, I'm sorry, that's not 1 year. That is June to January. Okay. It's part of our licensing for collections.
So we subscribe to LinkedIn, which is a resource sharing with the consortium, I guess is the term technically.
Okay.
And we pay a fee to be able to borrow materials from other libraries, and likewise they can borrow from us.
Okay. When you go search books, if we don't have it, yeah, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah, that costs money.
That's a considerable fee, isn't it? $21,000, almost $22,000.
We see it as part of the collection and services we offer to patrons. And it does expand our collection. We give them more choices because we don't have it, just.
Right, so we don't have to have everything.
Right.
And as a reminder to the board, when we renegotiated our agreement with Innovative and gone from 1 year to year over year, we were seeing a 5% increase with this company. When we went to a 3-year, that actually saved us thousands upon thousands of dollars. So that's actually significantly less than what it normally is. It's
Okay,
around
I remember.
36,000.
Yeah, we
Per
talked
year.
about that. Okay.
Now, this is only 6 months, but I don't think the other one is going to be as big. So it is significantly less because we renegotiated the contract.
I have another question.
Yes.
What's the amount of usage on that?
On LinkedIn? I don't know.
I mean, we're paying the $21,000. Are we getting 10 requests a month? Are we getting 700 a month? I mean, we're spending big money. What do we get? How much are we
usually have
using?
about 4 totes, plastic mail totes full of books per week that
Oh,
come and go from the library. So
All right.
about 16 per month.
Yeah, we're sending to other places, right?
Well, I just was wondering, Melissa.
I couldn't tell you the number off the top
Oh,
of
no,
my head.
not a number.
It's not heavily used, but it's necessary expense for sure.
So we're talking actual physical books here, books with binding on them.
books, tapes, whatever material, except the electronic resources, because then you can do it digitally. But if you want a movie and our library don't have it and the Naperville library has it, you can get from Naperville.
Okay, so this does not include like online sorts of things. This is just physical sorts of books and tapes. And
It's just a code, yeah.
That's the Digital Libraries of Illinois. That's our internet one that we just, or electronic one that we joined a couple, like last year, I think it was.
That's a different resource. This is LinkedIn.
Right, no, I'm saying, but that's to answer Larry's question.
Yeah.
That's where we get the digital things,
Yes.
the ebooks and that is from the Digital Libraries of Illinois. Yeah.
Correct. We did join a consortium this past year to share electronic resources as well, and there's thousands upon thousands more ebooks in our catalog now that didn't used to be there. So this is movies, music, and books, and also audiobooks. So they're testing video games right now and magazines. And the consortium is trying to figure out more stuff that they can transit back and forth. Because why would we leave it sitting on a shelf when we can send it to somebody else?
It's basically interlibrary loans.
Yeah. So we're borrowing from the neighbor's library.
Yes.
Okay.
And if we have, I'm presuming then we have calls we have requests for us to loan our materials to others then as well.
Yes.
Something.
It goes both ways, yeah.
Very good. All right, thank you. So is there anyone else who has any questions about the monthly board check details for April 2022?
This is perhaps a broader question, even though maybe it's too broad, but you were mentioned about like the cost of inflation, like stuff is just more expensive. So do you foresee that for this next fiscal year, putting any kind of strain on the budget with those inflation numbers, or do you think that we have enough kind of cushion to be able to kind of absorb those costs? And does that question make sense?
It makes sense, but we have the set amounts of money that we get from the city so we have to work with whatever we get. The only variable that I see that is the wild card is the union, because that we have no control over. Well, a little bit of control, right? But the other things, we have somewhat of control. If we don't have, if the books cost a lot more, well, maybe we'll just buy a little less, right? But the wild card is the union.
That's okay, thank you.
All right, do we need a motion or this would come before our monthly other meeting? This is all new territory, so
Yes.
what is recommended that we do with this, having gone through this?
The exact same thing we would have done during our finance audit committee. So make the recommendation to approve it for the board.
And that would be voted upon this evening if it's motion that way.
We're not voting on approving it, just voting on,
Presenting it to the full board.
Presenting it.
As
just
the
like
board
we
meeting.
would have
2
done
weeks in.
during finance committee.
Okay, very good. Okay, so then I would make a motion to bring this before the reviewed for the monthly board check detail for April 2022 to bring it to the next May meeting of full board for their approval. Is there a second? Gene second? Oh,
Yeah.
very good. Okay, now this requires a roll call, correct?
That can just take it to the board.
Okay.
Just all in favor is sufficient.
Okay, so all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstained? Very good. Here it is passed. Thank you. Also for the Finance and Facilities Committee, getting of the whole, we have repairs and improvements. We already have seen expenditures for repairs and improvements, actually for repairs and maintenance. And our review of the monthly board check detail for April 2022. Is there anything else that that I and our finance committee need to be made aware of in terms of repairs and improvements that are not been discussed or illustrated in what we went over?
If I may, Mr. Chair,
Yes.
As was discussed, as Nathan kind of pointed out, I've fired it up again, so I'm sorry if I blind anyone. I'm going to share a document that was created. Larry and Jean were both on the board at the time that this was originally created back in 2018. Our then director had requested a capital assessment plan for the library. So let me share the screen. As an example, and again, according to what Nathan mentioned, things are more expensive these days, much more expensive, but they're coming back. Building prices have gone up. Computer components are hard to come by. Graphics cards are almost twice as what they once were. Now they're coming back down. But the building itself, this is a beautiful building. It was built in 1963-ish. It is aging out. A lot of our equipment is aging. So let me just share this capital assessment plan. This was once recommended that the library went through a significant assessment by an outside appraiser to talk about where the library would see the greatest amount of need. So and I didn't share this with the board packet tonight because I didn't want everybody to have to print out 61 pages. It's pretty salty. There's a lot of detail, but I wanted to share with you a general example of what it would be like to plan for taking care of this building for the next 5, 10, 20, 30, 50 years. The group recommended that we put, a significant chunk into a rainy day fund in case anything happened. We're right now looking at having to repair 2 air handling units that'll cost anywhere between $25,000 and $50,000. And that's an unexpected expense, but it needs to be done or else it'll be really hot and humid in this building all summer long and people will not be happy. So not only the staff would not be happy, but the people that come and visit us would not come because it's too hot. So for example, boilers. This is another boiler room system, totaled $792,941 related to the boilers and the boiler room systems, like heating and air. And that's not a guaranteed because again,
That was 2 years ago or
this
3
is
years
3,
ago?
4 years of 2018.
So that's changed
It's
drastically.
changed. It has, but not drastically. I wouldn't say. I think the concept of setting aside money for unexpected expenses or having a rainy day fund has been a commonality in every library I've worked for. We had a little rainy day fund in case there was an unexpected expense that costs, especially one of these, a boiler machine goes out, it's 6 figures to replace the thing. We can repair it, and back in 2011, they band-aided the 2 air handling units on top of the roof, but eventually, 11 years later, we're going to have to go in 50,000 because they didn't go in earlier when they perhaps could have or should have. So at the end of the day, this is just an example. It's 61 pages long, but it did recommend putting a nest egg together where we would set aside a certain amount of the money to unexpected expenses and plugging money each year from the budget into that nest egg so that we can continue to grow it and take care of this building 30, 50 years into the future. The board at the time balked because it was a significant, about $500,000, $450,000 is what they recommended earmarking for rainy day, and then adding like $75,000 per year into that fund so that we, instead of having a 1.5 roughly $1 million in reserves, we would put that aside for building. And it becomes very complicated because at the end of the day, is it cheaper to renovate the building we currently have or to build a brand new building that never needs a whole lot of work for the next 10 years? That's a really complicated question, but the reason Rob included it on our agenda tonight is because it's something that this committee of the whole can discuss, planning for what this building will need moving into the future. And not, we've got $150,000 earmarked in our budget year to year for unexpected expenses like a van or like a air handling. We're not going to go over budget because we are facing a $50,000 expense, but we need to plan for that so that it doesn't throw our whole budget into the red if something happens. If we have 3 of those, then we've gobbled up our $150,000 prudent reserve and we get stuck. So again, intentionally planning for taking care of this building in the next 50 years is the goal. We can have another assessment plan made, or I can share this with you electronically, even print out a copy if you so desire to have one. I will share it with the board, but I wanted to at least share this document with you tonight. And again, the concept of having the committee of the whole was to focus on the check details, yes, but plan for big picture items for this organization moving into the future, like investments. And do we continue with CDs on a rotating basis every 6 months that we rotate out our CDs?
It
Fluctuates.
It fluctuates, right? But
Or do
more
we,
than 1 year.
or things like creating a permanent fund at the Lake County Community Foundation that won't necessarily yield a lot of money in the short term, but over the long term, it could assure that this library stays open, even if there's a economic collapse in the United States. We would have a nest egg and an outside organization that would help us, pay for the summer program indefinitely. If we put $1 million into a fund, they would kick us in interest each year. So those are big picture planning things that I think that's part of the purpose of this committee of the whole, so we can start bigger picture planning for the library.
Where would that money come from? Do we have that much excess left?
I mean,
No.
year over year,
That was a no.
1.5.
Right now, we probably have 2.5 million.
And as you said, we bought. It was deeper than that, but okay.
It was deeper than that, but the board decided to ignore this document. And
So that's something we as a board need to address at a soon coming meeting.
Sure. I mean, there's no rush. Again, the building's been up and running since '63, but moving forward, I think it would be wise to consider the long-term plan of the library. Not just a strategic plan, which is great. Every 5 years, we're rechurning and reburning and deciding what this library is and does for the community. But what about our kids and our kids' kids? Can they still come to this library? Because we've set it up for success for the next 50 or 100.
I included that facilities part in this committee of the whole because a lot of other library boards I saw had a buildings and grounds committee where they are looking at doing yearly checks of different parts of the library. Is this building still useful for us? What do we need to do differently? And I think including that now, so it's not just finance, but finance and facilities, will kind of create that push for us to keep an eye on this. Hopefully.
And Rebecca did comment in the chat that she would like to see a copy of this, so I will send out this
I would like to see a
report
copy
to the whole board, but if you want one printed, let me know. I'll print one up for you and have it waiting.
Well, I
You'd
think
rather.
To email, was that,
Hmm?
the email to us, yeah.
I certainly will.
Good first start, yeah. Thank you. All
Thanks,
right,
Rob.
well, that appears to be all that we have to consider and discuss tonight, this meeting for the Finance and Facilities Committee, so. That in mind, I'm finished.
Thank you, Larry.
Up next is Gerardo with Development Committee of the Whole.
Yes. So at our previous meeting, we started our reviews of the trustee facts file. We had chapters assigned. I believe I did one, John did one, presented. I believe Kathy presented. I want to say Steve presented as well, and maybe Deborah?
Yeah.
And Deborah as well,
she went first.
the first one. And then, would anyone volunteer to go next?
I can go next. I'm just going to pull it up. Okay. So I had chapter 5, which was policymaking. And it gave a definition of what policy is that well-defined, well-written policy is important to a public library because it guides trustees and library staff in carrying out their duties, helps ensure high-quality service to meet community needs, communicates privileges and duties regarding library use to the public, and helps ensure fair treatment of all patrons and staff, and helps ensure conformity to local, state, and federal laws. One of the things that it has in the chapter was what's the difference between a policy and a procedure? And policy is the written statement for guiding trustees and staff in providing library services to the community. And a procedure is specification of the steps needed to carry out a particular task. The library board develops, approves, and codifies all policies based on input from the director and staff. Policies are broad statements of intent. For example, the library's green room shall be made available for public use in 1-hour blocks, renewable on weekends. For procedure, it's effective boards delegate procedural work to the director and staff. And the procedures deal with the specifics like the nuts and the bolts. So an example of that is the library staff maintains a sign-in book for weekend use of the green room and tracks the usage. So the more specifics, and that is written by the executive director and the staff, not by the board. Policies need to be stated unambiguously, be capable of being applied consistently and fairly, be reasonable and capable of being implemented, and reflect the library's goals and objectives. Another thing that was in there was an example of good policy and bad policy. For example, if the policy was on loan period for books and audiobooks. A bad example was patrons may borrow books and audiobooks for a period of 3 weeks or 2 weeks. And it's bad because it's ambiguous. A better example is patrons may borrow books for 3 weeks. Patrons may borrow audiobooks for 2 weeks. So it's clear which is the 3 and which is the 2. Another one that I think is important was for lost materials. Patrons who lose loaned materials may be asked to pay for them. That's bad because it leaves room for unequal treatment and inconsistency. A better example is patrons who lose loaned materials will be charged the cost of replacing the materials. So it makes it so that it has to be done consistently. I created a flow chart, so when I share out these chapters to everyone, you can see it just gives a flow chart of how do we come up with policy. First, we need to identify a problem. Then we get staff or community input. Then we discuss it at a board meeting. we draft a policy statement and then approve it. Another thing that it talked about was codifying policies. So every policy should acquire an unique identifier, like a number, just like I did in the schedule. It needs to have date of approval, and it needs to be maintained online in an easy to update manual with a table of contents and index that are updated regularly. So I think that's something we're going to work on. And it's important that the board reviews policy on a regular basis. So yeah, that was policy making.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Would anyone else like to go? All right, Nathan.
So I had chapter 12, which talked about advocacy, and it talked about how trustees can champion it within the community and the importance of doing that, importance of being a voice on behalf of the library. The first step to that is knowing who the decision makers are and who has influence over library funding and those kinds of things, and to begin building those relationships now when we, before we go to someone to ask for stuff. And it also involves keeping track of what kind of things that relate to library funding, such as like legislation and that kind of thing is coming up. So paying attention to calls from the ALA and other more local library organizations about, hey, this issue is coming up, or this bill is before Illinois Senate, or this is an important thing that we need to be mindful of. And then the chapter concludes, which I thought was kind of helpful for those of us who aren't in law, that it has a glossary of legal and kind of political terms to know as you're entering into those conversations. And so that just so that you know that that's a helpful resource for us all.
Great, thank you.
Yeah.
All right. Anyone else, or we can move on to continuing education? Okay, yeah,
I
sure.
do mind if you want me to.
Oh, yeah, appreciate it.
Okay, sure. Let me pull this up here. And I'm gonna, okay, I'm just gonna do this voice wise. Okay, so chapter 8 was human resources. So ultimately, the most important decision a library board makes is to hire the library director, executive director. And they oversee the operations of the library and the staff. So as a board, we have to work on the job description, prioritizing goals, which really need to tie into the strategic plan for the library. We need to recruit by advertising in professional journals. We obviously cannot discriminate, and ask our legal counsel to help with anything that we have questions on. And it did say, you should use a consulting firm because that can kind of streamline the process, and they're the experts. Then we also have to do the performance evaluations, which should be annual, done annually. And then we have to check the goals, make sure they're, lining up with what we've said. They are. There should be a written component of the performance evaluation. It should be formal, written down, and then there should also be a self-assessment. The personal details of an employee's records are private. It said that if an executive director wants to resign, you should always let them, and talk to legal counsel if you want to determine if a director should be terminated with documented cause or at will. So there's a difference with them resigning versus us terminating them. Another section talked about that the library board should have a policy for handling staff grievances and that we really should not get involved with any type of staff grievances if it could be solved with the director. Next section was about salary and benefits. Libraries need to pay competitively, to attract and retain the top talent, but it does need to, fit in with the budget of the library. I thought this was kind of interesting that entry-level librarians should be paid the same as an entry-level school teacher with a master's degree, and then adjust it for a 12-month work year. I thought that was interesting. I think that's written down some like where in the law. I just didn't know that. And then check, with other libraries nearby. You should always provide benefits, insurance, retirement plans, etc. There should be a manual, human resources manual. And then the other thing that the board has to do with union negotiations is work, with the terms of employment with the union reps. And then the library director could also have input. And that was the chapter 8 on human resources.
Thank you. Any questions, comments, concerns regarding the presentations of today or the previous meetings? I did fundraising. I believe Steve had finances.
Yes.
Yeah, and I think, didn't he go?
Yeah, he went.
Yeah. It just leaves me.
No.
Next time.
It's okay.
Yeah.
And I believe the activity of going through the whole book is a yearly thing. There was something by law we have to do.
That would be more the serving our public 4.0. That's the standards that Illinois says that we should be going through. So.
All right.
Rob, do you have a chart of who has what chapters on?
Yeah.
Could you just reacquaint me with what I'm?
Yep. Let me pull that email up. Board homework. Okay. So Larry, you had chapter 6, intellectual freedom.
Chapter 6.
Yes.
Okay.
Intellectual freedom. Okay. And Jean was 7, planning. And I will re-forward the email to you. With that. No. Okay. Yeah. So if you want, I can re-forward it, and then it'll be at the top of your inbox, and it has an example of what they look like, and then I'll make a folder that'll have everybody's chapter summary. So then we'll all be knowledgeable of the book.
Cool. Sweet. Awesome. And then next would be continuing education. I don't know exactly how you want to move forward with that.
Just coming up with a plan of what we want to learn about and how do we get there.
Okay.
Rob and I discussed this, the concept of having a quarterly training for the trustees was part of the plan. So we met in November, we met again in March, and we're trying to keep up with this quarterly idea, but at some point, and Rob and I discussed this, maybe after a year or two, we don't need to do quarterly retreats or we could do maybe every 6 months or once a year, because hopefully y'all will stay on the board of trustees and we won't have to retrain you, and we will just be a fully well-oiled machine by a year or two's time. So I want to provide what, as an administrator, I would like to provide what you need to know and trainings that are engaging and fun and something that doesn't be like John and a PowerPoint and falling asleep. So that was the intention of this piece on the agenda tonight, is to kind of make a plan and stick with it.
Well, I'd just like to say quarterly might be best, 6 months for sure, because with the mayor going in and out and picking and choosing who they want, 5 of us might not be here next time, so it might be 5 new people. So you really will need to do this quarterly, So that's why.
I think we can make it where like it's quarterly, but there's 2 at least that are required and 2 that are recommended with new topics or something.
But I just don't think once a year is gonna.
Yeah.
To To Gene's point, what if, and to yours, Rob, what if we did like 2 that were required that were like, these are like the legal things. Hey, by the way, don't be doing stuff that's gonna get you in trouble. And then the other 2 were more, maybe we could make them optional or not, but would be more of like, just maybe more introduction into the library world, or more introduction into, hey, this is how you do a strategic plan. This is what that might look like, or kind of more of those. Yeah, so then at least every 6 months we're hitting the kind of stuff that we need to. Then there's also an opportunity for us to grow as library board members and develop, new capabilities.
And if I could give you a kind of a snapshot, the first training we did back in November was the legal stuff with Douglas and Carl giving us the don't break the Open Meetings Act, don't carry on meetings behind closed doors, etc. But the second one was more organization, like this is the organizational structure, this is kind of how we do business. The third one, which would be March, June, sometime in the month of June, would be the target of when we would like to do this. So we're sticking with the quarters. If you have desires, we don't have to talk about it now, but I'm open to suggestion as to what would be the next best thing to discuss. And again, Carl, please reach out if there's something else legally that we need to discuss, or if union negotiation is the flavor of the day, we can maybe make that part of the retreat. But at the end of the day, I'm open to suggestion in terms of what you want to learn about.
I don't know how well received the homework was, but I did have an idea that I talked to Gerardo about before, is having the homework of going or watching another library board meeting or interviewing a library board member from a different library board, just so we can see what we do different, what we might want to change, or what we know that we do best for our community and that fits us. But I don't want to like put that out there and it sounds goofy and no one wants to do it, and then it just falls flat. So yeah,
I think it's good.
I really like that idea. And I wonder too if we even, then if we did read it up, then we have options, right? So maybe it's reading the minutes, or maybe it's watching the video, or maybe it's just making a phone call, or maybe it's sending it. Like, it gives us enough flexibility to make it fit within our schedules. So good idea. I think that's great.
And since we are coming up on a summer, maybe that would be one of the optional ones where we don't have to meet in person, but we can do a lot more homework and attend the meeting and earmark part of the day to do some of that stuff. So we don't have to get a quorum and have a proper meeting, but we can.
Like a flipped classroom kind of.
Yeah. And then that would be a good committee, the whole agenda topic. You bring your homework back and you talk about it at a committee, the whole meeting for, what did we learn? Is there something that we can do that we're doing better that we might want to consider adding in or subtracting from what the board is doing? Can I go back and ask a more fundamental question? Because I think Gene raised a good point. Do we know your terms?
Yes.
Were you appointed for specific terms, or
yes,
so that you should have been, but do we have a nice list of who's up when?
Yes.
Okay.
I was just looking at that today because another thing I've been thinking about is the orientation for new board members, and we will have a term up this year, and it might be a new member. So, and we did have Steve enter in and really kind of like, what do we do for orientation? How do we make this best? So I have started working on a binder in that I shared with him, and but we do have some coming up, and I'm thinking about how do we make it so we don't have this trickle, because we have 1 this year, 2 next year, then all 6 in 2020, all of us. So
Well,
in 20,
you should not have been appointed that way.
it should know. And so that's what I want to figure out is,
Yeah.
Well, we've been having conversations about getting with the mayor and making sure that the mayor understands every year we're maybe a third or 2, 3 people, three
Yeah.
every 2 years. And so that way we're not completely flipping the board she did flip the board. So now at this
Right.
point, maybe extending a few and giving the out to those who maybe decided this isn't what they wanted to do, and making a plan that way.
Because
Because we can make recommendations to the mayor. president or I as the director can go to the mayor and say, we need new trustees, or, Rob is just a overbearing person, we need a better board president, which is not the case. I was just joking. But this is what the purpose of this meeting is, to have those conversations, talk about the homework, to make decisions about how we want to approach the mayor so that we're of one accord, instead of, 6 different people going to mayor asking for 7 different things.
Because 2024 is going to be rough.
My point was, we ought to maybe have the mayor look at the appointments to make sure that we do have 3 every year that are up. And if they weren't done that way, which sounds like they weren't, she can change that so that you get appointed again for the right periods of time, so that it's not an in mass in and out potential.
Because I think too, and this would it would be helpful, I think, to gain clarity on this, because some of us were appointed to fulfill the terms of other people.
Right.
So I think
That's my,
Yeah.
who you were
Not,
filling in.
the only person right now that's filling in for another term is Steve.
Right.
Steve's finishing Brian's term.
And then we got some that, like Larry's comes up maybe in June, and there were some trustees that were appointed in September. Like
Yeah,
the
we
mayor.
need to have it be a consistent month, and so.
So, yeah, under the statute, it is for a specific month, but you stay on until the successor is appointed. And so sometimes they overlap, it takes 3 months before an appointment is made. But that one doesn't get 3 years from the day of the appointment. It's until the next term is up. So it's 2 years and 9 months.
Right.
Okay, so they need to be in a cycle and name and term all provided, and then so that the secretary of this organization maintains that, and the executive director knows who's up when, and in advance of the appointment time, if you were wanting to be reappointed, you should send a letter to the mayor saying, hey, thank you for the appointment. I do want to have a re-up, or, I've had enough of this. I appreciate the appointment, but I need to turn it over to somebody else. So the mayor has time in advance of the appointment to know of your interest or disinterest in being considered for reappointment. That's a recommended kind of best practices approach to appointed local government seats like this. You get paid a lot for this, so it's almost worth it. Minimum wage is going up, so I don't need to say this, but I appreciate seeing what you guys are doing as a board, with a lot of new individuals on the board, really learning on the job, and not only that, but trying to learn very well. So I like what I'm seeing, not that it matters. Not every board that I go to of any kind puts forth the energy that you are in learning how to do things. And I told Rob that I wouldn't typically come to committee meetings, so I was probably surprised when I did show up tonight. I thought, since it's the first committee of the whole, I'll be here, but in the future, I won't come unless asked. That's not my role to inject too much of myself into what you guys do. I'm here as a resource.
Yeah, thank you.
I agree with you. We do have a good board.
Yeah,
Thank you.
It's been a breath of fresh air compared to past.
Do I need to make a motion to assign homework? That was somewhat serious. Do I need to make a motion to assign homework?
To assign homework?
Yes.
Or
Or we're just then gonna do it?
you can just say that you can make a motion that instead of having the June training, that that each board member, and I don't know exactly how you want to do this, be responsible for going to or either another meeting, observing another meeting, meeting with a library trustee and talking, I think is what.
Should we come up with a more definitive plan for the?
Yeah,
board
we
meeting?
could say,
Okay.
we could take
Come
it,
up
probably.
with a plan at the meeting to be presented. How's that?
All right.
Cool.
so we make a plan.
I'll second that.
All right.
Or the Rob comes back with one.
All right, awesome, thank you.
Yeah. And then last would be the general committee of the whole. This would be the place where we could bring anything that we need to for discussion before the main meeting. Of course, we could bring things at the main meeting. this is just the section that would be the catch-all of everything else. Now this would probably, since I renamed governance into policy, we can name it whatever. I just making up things. So it could be governance committee, it could be policy and procedure, or not procedures, but whatever. Someone has to talk about evaluating the executive director. So I put it here right now. One thing that I looked at while coming up with the review schedule was a broad timeline of what the executive director evaluation plan would look like. So on that thing that I printed off, and it's just 2 pieces of paper, just what that looks like. So I did it based on, of course, our Wednesdays, the first, second, or third, or fourth Wednesday of each month. So we would have a specific timeline that would come out in September. Now, of course, we might need to shift this around based on the contract or whatever that looks like. Then we have the survey that would go out to the all the board members to look at and answer. So that would be not the same thing that the executive director would have as the self-evaluation, but more the evaluation we have for them, which I didn't finish the draft of that before today, so I'll get that to you guys soon to look at. Then we go through, have to complete it by the end of that month. Then we would summarize the survey results and finish that by the second Wednesday in November so that it could be in the board packet for the 3rd Wednesday in November, that we would then share it out so that December we would have a closed session to evaluate the executive director, where we go through their goals and come up with goals for next year. And yeah, I don't know if it all makes sense. It was, of course, not finished. I put the below is incomplete because I think a mid-year evaluation is very important. I don't think we should wait as long as we have, but also a whole year. I think every 6 months would be a good time to check in on goals. How's it going? Do we need to adjust the goal? Do we need to change it? What changes have you noticed? And like, yeah, that's all I got. Then on the next pages are just the core standards for a library that I had them in there because I was coming up with what the evaluation plan might look like, and I forgot to take them out. So that's just for us to know, whatever. That wasn't supposed to be there. My bad. Yeah.
These dates,
Yeah.
where are they coming from?
Made them up.
So they're not the dates, they're just.
Right. So as I put on the first bullet point, I would give a specific, the board president would give a specific timeline on that September time. So then you would get it where it'd be the 13th of October and the, I don't know, the 12th of November. So each where it says 2nd Wednesday in November, I would then release that with the actual dates by that time. So we have a timeline of what we're looking at.
I'm just confused. Where did we get, why is September the date? Why is it not August? Why?
I just made it up and I just guessed at how long the process might take. So,
and we're shooting for having this done by the end of the year. So to start the new year out.
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
Can you remind me of my question, I guess, is whether December makes the most sense in terms of doing the evaluation just because of like Christmas and holidays and all those things. I was wondering if perhaps when does the fiscal year end? April 30th. Would it be worth considering maybe having it align with more of like the fiscal year anyway? So then if there are anything related to that, then we could build those in, and then we're not up against the holidays. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I mean, like I said, I just base it off the end of the year.
Sure.
Yeah, it can be whatever. I mean, I also, knowing that, like how Gene brought up, depending on the contract, which I assume we could also like figure out how to do it so that it lines up with this and we can get it to a certain thing, but I guess we'd have to also base off that, so.
Yeah, I was also thinking that not all, but a lot of transitions happen over summer. It feels like it's a pretty common time for people to move and make changes and that kind of thing. So I didn't know if then having it in May or April might, not necessarily, but might kind of build in that kind of, give us a few months at least to,
Yeah, we just want to make sure that it's not, so technically if it's July when our terms are supposed to end, that it's not happening in between then, so that we have not brand new people coming in.
Right. So maybe April. So if we started this in like January, kind of when we come back from Christmas, and then kind of the same schedule, but just for spring semester rather than fall semester.
John, you had something else?
I just had a message from Rebecca that she did not get this, so I sent it to her via email.
Thank you. Sorry, Rebecca.
That's okay. Yeah, I just was a little lost on what was going on.
Yeah, no worries. Well, last minute, I realized I forgot to include it in the board packet because I looked at all the other parts, not.
Yeah, no problem.
And so basically these dates are based on, I guess I'm confused because if he gets hired in September, whatever. We're working this to be through in April. You understand? That's where you understand what I'm trying to say?
I understand what you're saying.
Shouldn't these dates be maybe a number of months prior to the end of the contract instead of specific dates?
I mean, I see what you're saying, but I also, like I said before, I do think we need to do this regardless of where we're at with that contract as a way to, we have to test it, see what is going well, what's not going well, even if it's not the best evaluation that would give them the feedback. We at least are seeing and getting feedback from the executive director like, oh, this doesn't make sense. This is what we need to change.
Yeah, I haven't looked at this, but you're just looking for more of a formalized approach to board and executive director relations throughout the year, setting goals, checking in on them. From my perspective, you control the agenda. And so, you want to make sure you have a 6-month review on whether we're meeting the goals. Well, yeah, put it on the, every June it goes on that agenda, or quarterly it goes on the agenda. How are we doing on goal number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5? Or the executive director in their monthly report should tell you, I work on these things, this is where we're at on each of them. But you need to ask and work with the executive director regarding what level of communication do you want as with respect to meeting those goals. Because if the executive director doesn't have that information, you're not on the same page. So what I'm hearing, and I haven't seen it, but you're looking really to have that ongoing communication with the executive director. I'm good. I just wanted to make sure that this is really in response to Gene's question, should it be a specific month or is it, after certain month time points? And either way it works. because you're just saying, we're gonna put in here timestamps for when we look at things. Probably the library should say bookmarks.
You might want to look at that paper. I hear what you're saying, timestamps, okay? But this is saying that within these timeframes, this is when we're going to do it. And I understand, I agree with what you're saying, but wouldn't it be better that we say, okay, 6 months from the date of hire, we did this, instead of saying in the first week of September?
Yeah.
That's what I'm trying to say.
I understand where you come from.
I get what you're saying also, but that's what got us into not having a schedule of evaluating the executive director.
And Rob, you're starting with that you'll develop a timeline to share with the trustees and executive director by the first Wednesday in September.
Yeah.
So that's putting a burden on you to, by this date, have something to share for consideration and hopefully adoption or modification.
Yeah.
So that's not really anything to do with evaluating the executive director other than developing the evaluation.
Yeah.
I see it. So this is your timeline.
This is just an example timeline. It could be, I could say 60 days after the timeline is sent. It doesn't, I guess, matter. I just wanted to pick a specific date so it's in our policy review schedule.
I think maybe we'd take a time to maybe a further discussion as far as like whether date or
right. Yeah. This was
time frame makes more sense. So
yeah.
maybe we can talk about that.
Yeah, that's fine.
But yeah, I
just wanted to get the seed planted.
Yeah, getting an official schedule.
Cool. Okay. Well, that's that. We're not voting on anything. It's just putting that idea out there. Let's start thinking about that. And next we have announcements.
Board self-evaluation.
Oh, yeah, sorry. I'm going to move that to the next meeting. I did not complete the write-up about what your self-evaluation said, what we're going to do next. I'll get that to you guys next time. Next committee of the whole.
So are we on announcements now?
Yeah.
Our reference library brought to my attention, we have, and I gave me these to distribute to all of you, some very excellent programs for the month of May. He particularly pointed out the top, third column, adults and teens, One Woman Hamlet, Shakespeare and the Stigma of Mental Health, which is occurring tomorrow. Yeah, and then you're right, it's also here too. Thursday, May 5th from 4:30 p.m. to 6:15 p.m. It sounds very worthwhile, and he said he would love to have as much as participants and an audience as possible. He said they're very good, so just bringing that to the board's attention, as well as all these other very excellent programs that are on the agenda for the month of May. So, thank you.
Thank you, Larry. Any other announcements? Cool. So I move to adjourn the meeting. A second. Second. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Any abstain? Okay, the meeting was called to order at 8:08. So that was about an hour and a half. So met the goal. Cool.
Great meeting.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.